Okay, guys. So render settings in Rhino are fairly simple when it comes to rendering softwares. So what we're going to do is what we could do, I suppose, is just type in the command render. And that's literally going to just start rendering out your image. So we can see here it says render done. It only did 50 samples, which basically means it's processing light reflections 50 times. It took 0 minutes. So here we have it doesn't look much different from our Rhino settings here, a pretty simplistic render. But what we're going to do instead is actually dive into the settings of the render before we push the button. So what we're going to do is go to options, and then I'm going to click here on render. So this is if you changed to twin motion to V-Ray to whatever there's a plethora of options of renderers that if you want to add them onto your Rhino, this is where you would actually select those to change. So if I change this option here to V-Ray, when I typed that Rhino render command, it's going to open V-Ray instead of Rhino. So if you're having issues with your Rhino renderer opening, make sure that this is selected correctly. Here you can see we can select our views manually, very similar to Make 2D. So right now we just have our current viewport is open. But if your computer is really struggling to run with this rendered viewport open, if it starts to bog down your file, what you can do is just move into, let's say this one, or let's say it's just a completely different viewport. We'll do the front view. Here, we can open up those render options again. And for view, we can go over here to named view and then select our exterior render that we set over here. So your computer doesn't have to try to real-time render out what's happening on your screen and render out an image. Resolution and quality. So this gets pretty basic. This is the size of your file. So we know like 4K, 16 by 9. This comes in handy when you know your board layouts. So when you're rendering out your images, you kind of need to think like, okay, what size do I actually need? I wouldn't just go super large if you don't have to. Because if your render is only going to end up being like 6 by 8 inches on your board, anyways, it's going to take extra hours, hopefully just extra minutes, but extra hours to render out this image. And it can be really hard on your computer, make it hard to work on anything else while this is happening. So for now, we're just going to say, we're going to do like the same viewport here. Or let's see, actually, let's do, I'm going to do it on the 4K just so we can see what happens time-wise when we set it to this. We're pretending we're doing like that big money shot render that's going to be on our board. Quality. So here again, there's that 50 samples. You saw the render ended really quickly, but the quality of it looked like just a screenshot from a Rhino screen. Good quality is usually okay. If we're going to do, um, if you're doing something really complex, you might want to mess around with final quality. So we'll just say good for now. That should be fine. But if your good quality comes out and you want it to be better, final quality, you can do the best. You just have to recognize that what you're paying for in quality is more time. So it may take, I mean, I've seen renders take like overnight sometimes. Some people leave their renders to run overnight on their computers. Gets a little scary because if something goes wrong, you show up in the morning and you have to re-render it out during the day. It's just kind of a time game for quality and time. Right, so background here is our next setting. So what you can do is just have it be a white background, which is what it's set to right now. Real quick, I'm going to move back to our rendered viewport. Display. Okay, so what the background does if we change it from a solid color to, it's called the 360 environment here. This is going to change the way things are reflecting. It's also going to change our background. So right now we've got the solid white, but if we click this on our background and click OK, you can see our background changed to the studio background. So we have these lights here at the top. It's going to change the way light is reflecting off of this. So quickly, I'm going to go back here. We're going to go back to options. And then I'm going to go in here and I want to change this to be an exterior environment. So I'm going to click on the pencil icon here. Oh, that's editing the studio, excuse me. I'm going to click on this arrow down here and I'm going to click on this plus icon. And then similar to our material and material library, there's also an environment library here within your Rhino files. So I'm going to click on large icons and we can start to see kind of what these look like. A lot of them are interiors. This one's like inside a loft. We got inside an airport. But then we get to some nice exterior. Here's like a courtyard. I'm going to select here. I want Walden Pond. You can see there's some trees around here. We're going to select this. And when I press OK, you can see that environment changed. And I'm going to have some soft light reflecting off of this. Go back to our image here. There is more sunlight, though our building here is in shadow. So we're going to say that's okay for the time being. I'm going to re-click on this view so it's correctly oriented. So because I just want to use the lighting from this image, not necessarily this background, what we can do is go back in to options and I can select solid color here. So it's just a solid white. I've also selected here transparent background because I want my background to be transparent. And then I'm going to go in here and instead of having studio, I'm going to use Walden Pond and press OK. Now you can see the reflections happening on our reflective metal are literally that Walden Pond background instead of just the blank studio. So we can already say 100% we need to go in here and we need to edit the reflections. Go to my floor and we can see it's that aluminum white. And so what I can do is click here on that. And I don't want to create a unique copy. I'm going to take the 100% polished. I'm going to take it down to, I'm going to say 30%. Say okay. Perfect. And then I'm going to go back to my named views. Click here. And that looks great. Okay. So going back to my render options, you can mess around with that. We're going to turn on our ground plane. Say okay. Lighting, we already have our sun on. You can mess around with the skylight. I would keep it between 1 and 0. It gets a little intense above 1. This is where you can also add lighting to your renders. We're not going to do so because it complicates things, but if you wanted to add a light to do a nighttime render, you could do that within Rhino as well. Okay, and then this gets into some things that I'll talk about, but we're not necessarily going to mess with. So dithering and color adjustment. Gamma is going to mess with your mid-tone colors. So it helps make things look more realistic. You can start messing around with that. Dithering basically prevents color banding. So if you've seen an image where instead of a nice natural gradient, there starts to be like pixel stripes of colors, dithering helps with that. We're just going to leave it as is. Rendering channels. So when you render out an image, it's going to render out in layers, basically. So you can start to decide, instead of just like my color gradients, I want to use my material or my object IDs. So certain materials will be on a different render layer, certain objects will be on a different layer. When it comes to post-production, this can be helpful, something you can dive into on your own. For now, we're just going to work in Photoshop, and what we have here should be fine. So I'll keep it on automatic. And then here, seed is basically like this rendering itself. So the render seed. Samples, again, is how many times it's going to run over, and each time it processes light reflections. So if we remember up here in our quality, we already set it to fine. So 150 sample or 1500 samples. Here, if you wanted to set a custom amount, if you didn't want that in between, if you wanted something in between, basically, you could click override and just do 1,000. And then ray bounces, it's going to be how many times light is allowed to bounce off of objects. The higher the numbers here, the better quality the image is going to be. We're not going to necessarily get into the weeds of that. And then texture baking, this is something that people use for like animation or like video games. Now, quickly to talk about um, these different rendering devices that come on your computer. Yours might not look completely similar to mine. I have a Quadro P1000 graphics card. So for whatever graphics card you have, I believe this is NVIDIA is the brand that I have in my computer. It may show up differently. So I'm going to talk about the differences between these things very quickly, to the best of my knowledge. So CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. So selecting this as your rendering setting, you're doing so knowing that this is going to be highly accurate, and it's a very complex rendering. So you want to use this when you're dealing with a large rendering with a lot going on, really complex lighting or reflections. It's going to take longer for this to render out with this setting. CUDA here, see, this is going to be hybrid. So this is going to use your CPU and your graphics card. It is the best choice, I would say. It's very optimized. It can handle complex scenes, and it's going to basically be able to handle those complex scenes and be faster because it's a hybrid unit. You may also have a GPU as an option. I don't have that. So GPU, it's going to take less time, but it's going to have memory limits. So you may experience rendering issues or crashes because it's not going to have the same memory capacity as the CPU unit. Your CPU is going to use main RAM, so it's going to have more memory than the graphics card, which basically GPU is that graphics card only. So a lot of rendering engines are optimized for using GPU. So if you're using Twinmotion and things like that, you'll notice the renderings go really fast in Twinmotion because it's optimized to this process. So I'm going to go ahead and have CUDA selected when I'm rendering out my image. Perfect. So we're going to keep these settings as they are. We're going to press OK. And then again, we're going to go to render and press enter. All right, and so this time you can see we've got our sample count here, we've got a time count, and now we wait. So you can see it's going to take a long time, right? We have our denoiser on. That's great. That's basically going to help keep the graininess away. So you always want to have your denoiser on. If we click here, we can see our different layers. So this is like all of the layers put together in one. You can see our background. This one's with no background here, so the background becomes a transparency. You can start to see like the reflections our glass is making. So these are semi-transparent. So when we put an image behind it, you'll be able to see through it. but we can see the texture and reflection happening here with the glass, which is kind of nice. And then here we have these different color layers that are going to come out as well. And then you can also look at your alpha channel here, which basically cuts out, you know, the image is all black, which can be handy in post-production as well. If you needed to select all of this and you didn't want to have to go in and like trace out these shapes, you can select this all as one grouped object. Okay, so we can see here it's going to take some time. You can see our reflections are doing something weird. um, that is something a lot of times people render without their glass layer on. That's how I was taught to do it because it can cause more problems sometimes. So at this point, you could get in here and you could start to mess around with your reflection and refraction levels if you would like, for sure. We'll see what it looks like at the end. We can also get into Photoshop and start editing it as well. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop this one now because it's going to take too much time. We're going to say here, we're going to go to stop rendering. Make sure you stop the rendering. If you close out of this window, it's not going to automatically stop and your computer will be mad at you. Okay, so we stopped it. You can see here, I'm going to close out. No, I don't want to save the image. And then I'm going to go to options again. And then I'm going to go here to 500 samples instead. And I'm going to change the size. We're going to go, we'll say full HD. Okay. And then I'm going to take this. I'm actually going to go, we'll say, okay. I'm going to go to my glass layer. I'm going to click on the glass. And then here, let's see. We can start to mess with color and clarity. So IOR stands for index of refraction. So changing these levels is basically going to change the amount of light that passes through this object. Glass is going to be around 1.5 to 1.8, and that's around where we were at the beginning. But we can see the reflections are doing something weird. So I'm actually going to turn it down a bit. I'm going to put it at 1 and see if that helps those really prominent reflections that were happening in that render. So I'm going to push OK. I'm going to type in the command render again. And then we're going to see how this one goes. Okay, already that glass plane is looking nicer. Go to my alpha, there's less going on here. It'll be more subtle. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just let this cook. So I will see you when this is done. Okay, guys, so this rendering is now done. You can see there's some weird reflection stuff happening with the wood floor inside. So what I'm going to do is go back and edit that and then re-render out this image. So I'm going to say no. And then similarly to before, I'm going to click on this walnut polished. And then on roughness, let's say. I'm going to go to sheen. And we're going to turn that down. Half, let's say. Say okay. Let's try that. I'm going to type in render again. See, it's still being weird. I'm gonna turn that roughness up. Okay, that seemed like it helped a lot. Turning down the sheen and the roughness up. Now it just looks like a regular floor in there. So it is a trial and error process. Just take your time, be patient, always Google things. It seems like a lot, it's overwhelming, but Google the definitions to these words. It's pretty accessible. The information's out there. There's also a ton of YouTube videos of people showing how to do the same process, but they have different methods of doing so. And maybe they focus on something different. Like maybe they really focus on the camera settings and really deep dive into that if you're interested in it. Um, use all of your access use access to all of these different databases of knowledge. The Rhino forums as well is a great place to learn about this stuff. Okay, so now with our render finished, what we're going to do is save the file. So we're going to go to File, Save As. I'm going to name it Farnsworth House Exterior Rendering. And then I'm going to save it as a PNG. That way, our transparent background will show up. It's a supported file type, so we'll just go ahead and do that. Press Save. Okay, and now for the next video, we will move over to Photoshop.